He left me and our 2 children for a rich woman. Said I was holding him back. Years later, he returned, broken, barefoot, and begging at my gate. But what I did next shocked the entire village. Jane met James in the village. Life was hard, but love made it bearable. They were young, hopeful, and very poor. Jane sold roasted plantain by the roadside, while James took on small carpentry jobs, barely earning enough to survive. Still, their love blossomed like wildflowers in the harmattan dust. When Jane became pregnant with their first child, James promised her the world. He spoke of dreams, moving to the city, starting a business, building a real future. She believed him. She trusted him. They got married in a small traditional ceremony, with nothing but borrowed wrappers and blessings. Their second child came when they were still struggling. Jane worked twice as hard, even with the baby strapped to her back. She believed that one day, things would change, for the better. But she never imagined the kind of change that was coming. It was one of those dry, scorching afternoons. The kind when the heat wraps around your body like a suffocating blanket. James was in his makeshift carpentry shed, sweating, shirtless, and focused, chiseling a window frame for a customer. That's when it happened. A shiny red SUV pulled up by the roadside, scattering a trail of dust and turning heads. Nobody drove a car like that in their village unless they were visiting or showing off. The door opened, and out stepped a woman in heels too high for the dusty soil and sunglasses that concealed everything but her power. She was beautiful, polished, rich. Her name was Madame Stella. She walked straight up to James like she already knew him. "My kitchen cabinets are falling apart," she said, glancing at his tools. "I need someone capable. You look like you know your way around wood." James stood frozen for a moment. He'd never been spoken to like that, especially not by someone who smelled of imported perfume and wore gold bracelets that jingled with every gesture. That same evening, he followed her to her mansion on the edge of town. What was supposed to be a one-day job turned into a weekend project. Then it turned into weekdays. Then late nights. Jane began to notice. He started coming home with excuses, talking about big clients and opportunities that didn't add up. She saw new shirts, ironed, clean, not like the rugged ones she washed with her hands. There was a new phone, a pair of shoes they never budgeted for. "James, what's happening?" Jane asked one night while putting the baby to sleep. "You're changing. This isn't you." Instead of comfort, she got contempt. "Maybe I'm tired of being poor," he snapped. "Tired of this miserable life. You want to trap me here forever with your roadside business and crying babies." Those words stung deeper than any slap. Then came the final blow. One night, he walked in, didn't eat, didn't speak. He packed a small bag, avoiding her eyes. "You're leaving again?" she asked, heart trembling. He zipped the bag and said it coldly, without emotion. "I'm not coming back. I can't suffer anymore. I'm with Stella now. She sees my worth. You'll survive. You always do." And just like that, he walked out of her life, out of his children's lives, and into the arms of a woman whose money made him forget where he came from. Jane stood there, a baby on her hip and another sleeping on the mat, numb with silence. She didn't cry immediately. She didn't scream. She just stared at the door, the last place he stood as her husband. He didn't even say goodbye to the children. When James walked out, Jane was left with nothing but 2 children, a tiny mat, and a broken heart. But sorrow didn't pay bills. She woke up the next morning to the crying of her infant son and the confused eyes of her older child asking, "Where's Daddy?" She didn't have an answer. Word spread like wildfire through the village. James has followed a rich woman. Jane wasn't enough. She should have known he'd leave. She's too ordinary for a man like that. Jane became the face of gossip, the subject of pitiful stares and silent judgment. Women whispered behind her back at the market. Men looked at her with either lust or pity, but never with respect. But Jane refused to let bitterness eat her alive. She tied her baby to her back and began frying akara at 4 a.m. each morning. She would light her charcoal stove in the dark and prepare her beans paste while singing softly to herself, even when her heart was in pieces. By 6 a.m., she'd be at the roadside, serving hot akara and pap to drivers and laborists heading to work. Rain or shine, she was there. At midday, she cleaned people's homes for a few hundred naira. She washed clothes, fetched water, weeded farms. Her hands cracked from soap and sun, but she kept going. When she got home at night, she cooked, helped her older son with homework using candlelight, and prayed silently while breastfeeding her baby, asking God for strength, not revenge. Her body grew tired, but her spirit didn't break. One day, while washing clothes outside a rich woman's compound, the woman, Mama Nkechi, watched her carefully. Jane didn't complain once. She scrubbed, rinsed, and sang softly even as her baby cried. "Do you know how to sew?" the woman asked. "No, Ma," Jane replied. "But I can learn." Mama Nkechi introduced her to a foundation that helped struggling widows and abandoned wives learn skills. Jane enrolled in their free tailoring class. She would go early in the morning, carry her baby on her back, and listen with full attention. Within 6 months, she became one of the best in the program. Her hands that once scrubbed floors now threaded needles and stitched fabric into beauty. She started designing ankara dresses from leftover materials. She made one for her son's school play. People started asking, "Who made this?" Soon, she got her first paid job, then another. Then a customer gave her a small loan to get her own sewing machine. Jane opened a tiny shop by the roadside. She painted it blue, placed her name boldly, Jane's Touch Tailoring. She began to train other women. Word spread. She was no longer just the woman James abandoned. She was Jane the businesswoman, Jane the provider, Jane the fighter. Her children returned to school, dressed in clean uniforms she made herself. They walked tall, because their mother taught them how to stand, even when everything else fell. And though her nights were still quiet and lonely, her heart no longer wept. She didn't just survive James's betrayal. She used it as fuel. Time, they say, is the greatest teacher, and for James, it was also the cruelest judge. 3 years had passed since he left Jane. At first, everything looked like a dream. Living in Madame Stella's mansion felt like finally escaping the poverty he once hated. He dined on foreign meals, wore expensive clothes, and rode in air-conditioned cars. He laughed at how far he had come, boasting to old friends that he'd leveled up. But what James didn't realize was that money without roots grows wings. And Madame Stella's money had wings. Her business empire began to crumble. A corrupt business partner vanished with millions. Government officials raided her stores. Her accounts were frozen, and soon, she was under investigation for tax fraud. The mansion was the first to go. Then the cars. Then the luxury clothes. And when the dust of reality settled, Madame Stella looked at James, the man she picked from the dust, and saw nothing but dead weight. "You're not a husband," she hissed one day. "You're a parasite." She threw him out like used tissue. With nowhere to go, James returned to the same dusty village he had once called miserable. The village where he left a woman and 2 children in poverty, believing they would crumble without him. He returned with just a worn-out bag, a torn shirt, and shoes with soles that flapped as he walked. His once proud shoulders were now slouched. The same villagers who once envied him now watched with cold amusement. That's him, James. The one who left his wife for a rich widow. Look at him now. Even his shadow looks hungry. James begged for small jobs, clearing gutters, fetching firewood, fixing broken stools. But even the poorest men turned him away. He began sleeping in uncompleted buildings, living off scraps, and wondering how the same hands that once held luxury now dug through trash. One Sunday morning, weakened by hunger and shame, James wandered toward the edge of the village. Something pulled him forward, perhaps guilt or desperation. Then he saw it. A tall blue sign, Jane's Touch Tailoring. He froze. Could it be? He stepped closer. The shop looked clean, busy, successful. A young boy in a neat school uniform came out, carrying a tray of juice. James recognized his walk, his son. The same child he left crying years ago. Behind the glass sat Jane. Radiant. composed, dressed in a fitted Ankara gown of her own design. Her sewing machine hummed beside her, and her younger child played at her feet. James didn't realize his knees had buckled until he hit the ground. He didn't knock. He didn't call. He simply sat outside, under the sun, waiting, dusty, hungry, and defeated. James sat quietly outside Jane's shop, his body bent like a broken branch under the weight of shame. The same hands that once pushed her away now trembled with regret. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. His stomach groaned louder than his pride, and yet, it wasn't hunger that tortured him. It was the sight of what she had become. From where he sat, he watched Jane laugh with a customer. Her smile was calm, not the timid smile he once knew, but a confident glow that came from self-worth. Her head was high, her clothes immaculate. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. His heart ached. This was the woman he left barefoot, broken, and carrying 2 children in the rain. Now, she had built an empire, stitch by stitch. A few moments later, the door creaked open. Jane stepped out. She stopped in her tracks when she saw him. Their eyes met. For a long, heavy second, silence sat between them like a third ghost. The air grew still. Children played in the distance. A goat bleated across the road. But in Jane's world, everything faded, except the sight of the man who once shattered her. James struggled to his knees. His voice cracked. His eyes filled. "Jane, please, forgive me." Tears streamed down his face. Not the shallow tears of manipulation, but deep rivers of a man drowning in his own mistakes. "I've lost everything," he whispered. "Stella used me and threw me away. I have no home, no food, no one." People passing by began to slow down. Some stopped. A few recognized him. But Jane remained still. She looked at the man who once told her she was a burden. The man who abandoned their children without a word. The man who traded her loyalty for luxury. And then she said the words no one expected. "I forgave you the day you left." James looked up, stunned. But forgiveness doesn't mean I forgot. And it doesn't mean you can walk back into the life you threw away. She reached into her bag and pulled out a bottle of water. She placed it beside him. "You may rest here today. You may eat. You may even sleep on my porch. But understand something, James." She looked him square in the eye, her voice calm but firm. "I am not the woman you left behind. I found myself in the fire you left me to burn in. And I built a life from the ashes." James dropped his head and wept. The villagers watching began to murmur. Some nodded in respect. Others shook their heads at the tragedy of it all. Jane turned and walked back into her shop. Her children stood by the door, watching everything. She touched their heads and said softly, "That man, he is your father. You will respect him. But know this, your mother built this life for you. Never forget that." That night, Jane gave James a mat and a warm meal. Not because she owed him anything, but because healing had made her kind, not weak. James stayed on Jane's front porch for 3 nights. He didn't ask for more, he couldn't. Every time he looked into her eyes, he saw the reflection of his own failures. Jane treated him with quiet dignity, not hostility. She didn't scream. She didn't shame him in public. That was never her style. Instead, she showed him what true strength looked like. On the 4th day, she called him aside. Her tone was gentle but unshakable. "James," she began, "I won't let bitterness shape who I am. I've made peace with the past, but I will not allow it back into my present." She handed him a small envelope. It contained a few naira notes and a handwritten address. "There's a factory outside town. They need laborers. A friend of mine can get you in. It's not much, but it's a start. Take it. Go rebuild your life." James couldn't speak. His mouth trembled. His eyes welled up again. He wanted to say thank you, but what words could ever cover what he had done? He took the envelope with both hands and bowed his head. That was the last time Jane saw him.